It's an honor having you here today in the session of Volcano Immersive, second edition, Conquer and Reconnect. How are you? Tell us a little bit more about yourself before you can start the event. Yossi is the CEO of Grupo Tenlot, so welcome.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be here with you today from Israel. I would like to thank the organizers of this great event and congratulate them, because what you're doing is historic and I believe of great importance to Guatemala and the region of Central America. It is the creation of the awareness about the importance of innovation for the development of communities. We are at a key moment in history, and entrepreneurship is an essential part of technological advances that today changes the life of all of us. And for me, it's a great pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Tenlot Group and the co-founder of AgroLoom, also the chairman of the investment committee of our fund, family venture fund that has invested heavily in many Israeli companies.
Okay, then thank you very much for being here. The honor is ours, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, after this, I would also like to thank the Israeli Embassy in Guatemala and the Ambassador Mati Cohen and his great team. You know, the fact that the Israeli Embassy is one of the main sponsors of this event and the only foreign embassy, it says a lot about what innovation and entrepreneurship represent to Israel, and the way the Israeli government considers their role in the national development of entrepreneurship. So here we are all young people. Those who are not young by age are surely young by spirit. What leads to innovation is not intelligence of a person. It is the spirit behind the person. It is the enthusiasm to want breaking paradigms, the desire to break schemes, to unbalance consensus. Those young by their spirit, those who do not fear to dream, those who do not fear to take chances, are those who have created a national ecosystem that supports the generation of modernization of each area in our lives. Look, I come from a land considered as the startup nation. If before people referred to Israel just as the Holy Land as their main reference, and other people referred it's the center of the world conflicts, well, today, the holiness of Israel is at the height of the technological advances. Israel nowadays is a synonymous of innovation, creativity, of daring advances, of venture capital, of course. Israel is 72 years old. My grandmother is 86. When she came to Turkey, this land was not far. It was described by Mark Twain, calling Palestine at that time, 81, a desolated country. He said there was hardly a tree anywhere. Even the olive and the cactus, those fast friends of the worthless soil, had almost deserted the country. So although trees did exist at that time, there was more desert than any fertile land. During our first years of independence, 2 out of 3 Israeli citizens actually came from foreign countries without any common language or belongings. but with much determination. We are consolidated in our DNA as a foreign conglomerate. My dad is from Turkey, my mom is from Lebanon, my uncle is from England, my cousin was born in Mexico, the managing partner of our investment fund was born in Uzbekistan, and my best friend is from Belarus. There is something about being a foreigner in the sense of getting to a destination without much, which makes someone not being afraid to assume risks. In this period of independence, as the development progressed while having all those technological achievements as never seen before, Israel went through 7 wars in addition to 7 other significant armed conflicts. We saw development under permanent conflicts. We saw technological advance under wars. In the early years, families had so little. You know, many depended on help of coupon books granted by the states, 1 egg a week per person, and long lines to get a bread. And much has been changed during these 72 years. You know, the long lines to get state food, in which my grandfather waited long hours to feed his children, became long lists of companies listed on the stock exchange in technological invention, 12 Nobel Prizes in literature, chemistry, among others. With great idealism and conviction of the need for self-defense, Israel has managed to turn its chronic disadvantages in continuous growth opportunities. Its lack of natural resources became the source of our revolutionary inventions. Our desert became fertile land, while the lack of water turned into high technology for irrigation and large projects of desalination. But before mentioning the technological culture in Israel or the vision implemented by the Israeli state, it is important to touch the cultural aspect of the Israeli himself. It is critical to understand this typical Israeli entrepreneur. I'm sure that much has been said about the chutzpah, the word that doesn't have accurate or easy translation to other languages, and summarize it all by just saying maybe daring style. But the Israeli is a strong drive, a must-win attitude. We're not afraid to knock on every door. We always think on solutions. It is like, you know, a driven approach to solve every problem. And today I would like also to touch another aspect of it, which I call the boss policy. In Israel, we all think of ourselves as bosses. We are all university professors, soldiers are on their first day, a major general, and we are all prime minister. This is how it is in a society that is born from challenge and struggle, ceasing to fear and giving opinions on everything. We lose our fear of challenging hierarchies and expressing a different opinion of that of the boss, whoever. And this has become the norm. In many aspects, this by itself is a cultural patent made in Israel. In most of societies, especially in Latin America and some Asian cultures as well, authorities are rarely challenged. The titles and positions are even seen with certain sanctity. In Israel, we try as much as we can to learn from mistakes. We tolerate failures. And maybe that is the key of making a real change. In Latin America, for example, to think that an army sergeant will tell his general, this is not how you should do it. It's almost unthinkable. Many times it is seen in Latin America. I lived in Mexico for 4 years. I lived in the Dominican Republic for more than 6 years. You see that some family members call their father, uncle, cousin, or good friend, doctor, or colonel, or general, or minister, years after he stopped being a minister himself. So you see how this boss issue is in the DNA of the culture. And in Israel, everyone is boss. And although this culture style can generate messes and noises, although many can classify us as badly educated, it is clear that the secret of entrepreneurship, innovation, creativity, technologies that have revolutionized the world and which have positioned the state of Israel as the startup nation, they happened not only because of the need to seek alternative to existential challenges, but also when individuals dared to challenge consensus, to ask, doubt, criticize, when others failed to question everything. We can see that Israeli best technologies were born from improvisation and experiment with no fear to failure. In my own company, in companies that we invest in actually, in any Israeli startup, when someone identifies something he doesn't agree to or thinks his idea is just better, he speaks out loudly. You know, we encourage our team to think different and speak out. General ministers, CEOs, or any low-level employee, it doesn't matter. If the team member sees something he doesn't like or thinks something can be done better, you are encouraged to speak up and say so. I actually always say to my team, it is not only that it's important to do so, it's your obligation and responsibility to do so as a team member. So in Israel, you can see a soldier is not defined by his rank, but by his ability and his initiatives. As many of you might know, most Israeli young people have to go through a military service of about 3 years. Women serve 2 years. Many of the young soldiers learn technical skills in engineering, computer science during their military service, developing extraordinary solutions, each one in his own segment, in his own discipline, comes out with a phenomenal abilities. But perhaps more importantly, many of the soldiers learn operational tactics and build leadership skills. Well, you get to be a commander at a very young age. When you leave the army at 22 years old, you have a unique maturity to face complex situations, to solve problems. And these young people not only conclude their service with technical expertise, but with self-confidence to lead new ideas and trust themselves to face new challenges. After their mochileros trip around the world, mine was to the Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Cuba. I spent there about 3 months. Many of the young people, those former soldiers, they go and enter to the universities to follow their line of military expertise in technological areas, engineering, system, physics, and more. I'm not one of them, I have to admit. I went to study law and international relations. But I saw them from the other building at the university. These same engineers, when the army at the 20 years old, had to solve national security problems, identify terrorist movements on the border, understand how to identify underground tunnels with creativity and originality. They are solving the challenges of today. They are creating the atmosphere of innovation here in Israel. And that is how we can explain, for example, the Israeli success in cybersecurity, in fintech solutions, and more. Almost half of the world's biggest companies such as Google, Microsoft, IBM, Apple, Intel, Amazon, many more, have bought an Israeli technology company or opened a research center in the Holy Land. This, of course, makes it much easier for Israeli startups to attract investment and customers from all around the world. Except China, Israel has more companies listed on NASDAQ stock exchange than any other country outside the United States. To give you an idea, the total volume of capital raised by Israeli tech companies in 2019 alone reached approximately $9 billion US. Each year, more than 7,000 technologies patents apply for registration in Israel. So more than just bosses, I believe we're just a risk takers by nature. I don't know if it is because we come from a country with the military culture of continuous confrontations and permanent risks, but here we take risks. Just see the facts on venture capital investment per capita between 2014 and 2019. While in Israel, the investment was $965 per capita. In the US, it was around 300. In China, $44, and in the European Union, only $43. Let me repeat. In Israel, the venture capital investment per capita was $965, while in the European Union, 43. So you can see that breaking boundaries of Israeli innovation is a broad national task, and this is another Israeli secret. Leading in future technologies require investment in resource infrastructures, human capital in academy, and alongside investment in research and development in the industry itself. The development of an ecosystem and the assimilation of Israeli technological developments in the economy requires not only regulatory encouragement, but real government investment. So here is another Israeli success secret. In 2018, the Israeli government invested in 920 startup companies and financed about 1,500 innovative projects totaling 1.7 billion shekels. It's about $500 million. About 3,000 Israeli companies submitted a request to the government for support in the development and research. So with 9.2 million people in Israel, about 22,000 square kilometers, 44,000 USD of GDP per capita, we can see that the investment in R&D is almost 5% of the gross domestic product. Tel Aviv is one of the greatest tech hubs in the world, and it has the highest number of startups per capita in the globe and the highest investment of GDP in R&D. We have about 400 R&D centers in Israel. For example, let's look at the cybersecurity sector. About 18% of global civilian investment, meaning non-governmental investment in the cyber sector, are in Israel. Almost 20% of the world private investment in this segment. If we look at the figures of the last decade, from 2010 to 2020, we can see an unbelievable number of more than 10,600 startups established. The Israeli high-tech industry continues to produce about 1,000 new innovative companies every year. And look at this. Look at this. 55 billion US dollars was raised by Israeli high-tech companies in this past decade. We had about $113 billion just on mergers and acquisitions, M&A. On IPOs, $4.5 billion. In NASDAQ, you can find 99 Israeli tech companies listed. Another important or interesting detail is that Israel is among the top 9 countries in the world in terms of growth in adult wealth in 2019, according to the Global Wealth Report published by Credit Suisse. It also shows, and I'm absolutely sure it will interest you, that Israel has today about 130,000 millionaires. It means people that have $1 million free to invest. During 2017, 120,000 millionaires lived here. In 2015, about 100,000. So this number is expected to increase by 32% over the next 4 years to reach 174,000 millionaires by 2024. Now, why it is important to mention it? Because when we talk about new millionaires, we're not talking about families that historically were born without missing anything. We are talking about men and women who dreamed big, who took on challenges, who sold their companies, who generated wealth because of their ability to dream and act. The growth of millionaires is a reflection, after all, of the entrepreneurial society that we live in. Look at this. In Israel, you can find almost 27,000 Israeli entrepreneurs. It means founders and co-founders. About 20% of the entrepreneurs founded more than one company, and 5% of them founded more than two companies. So let's talk some references. Here are some of the biggest deals of the last few years, and I'm sure that many of you already know them. Checkmark, acquired by Hellman and Friedman for $1.1 billion this year. Movit, acquired by Intel for $1 billion, 2020, this year as well. Click, acquired by Salesforce for more than $1 billion on 2019, last year actually. Mobileye, acquired by Intel for more than $15 billion on 2017, and etc., etc. So we see that mega rounds over $100 million in 2019. 20 such deals captured 35% of the annual capital, which is much higher than any of the recent years. Artificial intelligence was the dominant tech activity in the preceding decade, climbing investment amounts dedicated to bringing the newest AI technology to the playing field. $3.7 billion was invested in about 200 artificial intelligence related companies in 2019 alone. So after this long introduction, I would like to tell you a little bit about our personal experience from our investments in startups and our point of view. Our investment group, led by the Israeli philanthropic and industrialist Jacob Engel, created 4 years ago with the master end of the co-founder and director of our fund, Jonathan Brenda, a family venture fund. Our objective was to invest in Israeli companies or Israeli technology related to deep technology in areas of human-computer interaction, computer vision, artificial intelligence, and a few more. In general, the past doesn't interest us in terms of investment, nor do we seek solutions to current problems. We look to the future. The look to the future is perhaps what most characterized our investments. Our resources are activated and invested not in sustain the present, but to care for the future. To date, we have invested in dozens of companies in these past 4 years, perhaps more than 30 startups. We work closely with the commercialization department of the university, which is itself another Israeli uniqueness. So listen to this, guys. Universities have discovered the potential of their doctoral students in formulating research papers that may develop to a lifelong technologies. They have formulated an exemplary strategy, taking the research work of the doctoral students, and at the same time, they look for partners and venture capital funds to convert the research into a life-changing product. Most of the large companies sold originate their technologies innovation out of the commercialization departments of the university. And this is a huge industry sponsored by the academy. In our fund, for example, about 80% of the companies in which we have invested are the result of academic work at the university and in full cooperation with the academy. It is the result and intensive work and development of university laboratories. The truth is that we knew very high success rate, great success. Some of the companies in which we invested were already sold to the big ones. And it's amazing to see it all starts with 2 or 3 people presenting an idea. Today, most of our companies employ dozens, if not hundreds of workers, selling for tens of millions of dollars every year. We advocate and implement what we call our family management strategy in our investment. Every company we invest in, for us, is considered a new member in the family. Imagine the power of such large family, what it means to have the power of networking of a broad family with over 30 companies operating in this method. Every company CEO has his own connections, has his own unique knowledge and experience, and therefore under the same family umbrella, if one of the companies needs help, if one of the CEOs is in need for assistance, we connect them all for assistance and solutions. It is likely that in many cases, where one of the CEOs of the companies has encountered a problem, someone from the family has already solved it in his own way in the past. That is, I believe, our uniqueness. We have set up a fund to invest in young entrepreneurs and grow young companies, to create jobs and to grow Israeli society. When my grandfather immigrated to Israel from Turkey, he came with a dream. This is the Zionist dream. For us, investing in a startup company is assistance in continuing the Zionist dream. Many other funds are mainly financial entities, educated people with broad economic experience and knowledge. We are, on the other end, a fund that works with entrepreneurs in the field, mutual responsibility, deep involvement, assistance. And our main rule is not investing in technology, but investing in people. If the people are good, we look at their solutions. Then the size of the market. We are looking for crazy solutions. Streamlining a banking process is less magical for us. We are looking for solutions for a large decentralized market without a single market leader, an important field for humanity, a field that contains a solution to our fears, to our needs as a society, as a government. So friends, let's tell the truth. It's very, very difficult to start a company. It's almost an impossible mission. It requires unbelievable sacrifice. Imagine for a second, it all starts with two people with an idea and the ability to break boundaries, build a solution that fits the international market is difficult indeed. This is perhaps, by the way, the magic secret of Israel. Its companies, most of the startups, do not stand up just to provide a solution to a local problem, but to a global problem. The Israeli advantage is actually its small size. So most of Israeli companies are built in advance from a global perspective. When we're considering a new company, it is important to us that the solution it offers will lead to an organic growth. It is important that it is aimed to a broad and large sector that knows as many populations and geographies as possible. To entrepreneurs among you today, and I know that there are many of you here, I will just say this. Come to a meeting with an investor with numbers, not just with presentation, numbers on the size of the market, on the size of the opportunity. We as a fund, we evaluate 650 startups, companies every year. We invest between $1 million to $9 million in each, and 100% of the time, we are the first investors. Therefore, we do not even define ourselves as typical investor, but as a founding partner. Even the bank account we set up together. And starting from that moment, we are really on the ground with the developers, building the company from scratch, which is why we invest in average 5-8 companies a year. It has nothing to do with money. It has to do with time and, of course, the deep involvement. There are those funds that advocate the spray and pray policy. You invest in many directions and pray for success. This method does work quite a bit sometimes, of course not, but we do not support that principle. Every company we invest in is like it's our own business. We're involved 100% of the time, contributing to the growth. And if we characterize our entrepreneurs from our 30 companies, we can say that each of them is a warrior and a trader by heart. They are warriors, brave people, not afraid to get a battle of their own, and they are all businessmen by nature. To be honest, there is no secret and no key rule to the success of startups. There is no a single global expert who knows how to teach the success of startup company. While there are those who will talk about the principles of success, it is very difficult to succeed in the field. It depends on manpower, on timing. I've learned that it depends also on luck and many more items. But if it is required to outline what makes a country more successful, well, there are some clear characteristics that I would like to share with you today. First of all, there is the entrepreneurial culture, the quality of the startups, the serial entrepreneurs, the technology clusters, and all the characteristics that we've mentioned since the beginning of this presentation. Then you have the strong cooperation between sectors, the focus of collaboration between industry and academy, between government and universities, between the security and defense and startup, between national and private sector. All those are at the core of Israelis maintaining its technological advance. Of course, another component is the educated human resources. Skilled human resources are strategic asset in the knowledgeable society, and the quality of human capital, of course, was essential to the innovation and economic growth of Israel. The Israeli higher education system, supported by the government, contributed greatly to the success of Israeli high-tech arena. Of course, you have the quality of academic institutions, the research, the scientists. We mentioned the 12 Nobel Prize winners, but also Weizmann Institute, the Technion, leading academy entities recognized globally. And there is also the government support. We talked about it. Innovation authority with special programs, grants, incubators, human resources, tax initiatives. The government's innovation policy had many achievements here in Israel. For decades, the state of Israel encouraged technological entrepreneurship and investment in the industrial R&D through various programs. It operated via the Office of the Chief Scientist and continues to do so even more vigorously today through the Innovation Authority. Look at that. In 2008, a professor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem studied the impact of the government support on initiative R&D in the business sector more than a decade ago. His conclusion was quite clear. The direct result of governmental support in R&D is the creation of new researches of up to 2 to 3 times higher value than the amount of the initial government grant. It was also found that the governmental support created an added value to the industry, which is 5 to 10 times higher than the governmental investment. This investment did not only didn't push the private investors away, but they rather created a significant and separate addition to the Israeli R&D industry. Guatemala is our gateway to the continent, to the region. We don't think Guatemala just as a great friend, a loyal friend, but rather a place with a phenomenal growth potential. We see financial stability. We can see it in this area of COVID. We see in Guatemala legal security platform for foreign investors. And as the CEO of Tenlot Group, I can say that our company has invested over $20 million as private investment in the country. We actually have established the National Lottery of Guatemala with technology and transparency that has never been there before. We have 150 employees, presence in about 5,000 point of sales. And I can proudly say that our investment in Guatemala represents today the biggest Israeli private investment in the country. But beyond that, Guatemala is a platform for growth. We are undoubtedly considering opening a representative office for our fund in Guatemala. As part of this, we will be able to examine deep technology that will emerge from universities in Latin America. So the key to innovation is the capability to establish and cultivate a culture in which young people are not afraid to establish their own startups. This requires capable human capital as well as a supportive business environment. The governments of Central America can play, of course, a key role in that. And I have to say, in a personal note, that I'm happy to see how this government has given to innovation and new technologies a good place in the agenda. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And to the young people who look at us, I will say this: guys, take risks, dare to explore. After all, that is the secret. Do not be afraid to dream big. And by the way, don't be afraid to add more people to your team. Don't be afraid to share the cake. Establish a solid team made of smart and knowledgeable people who are dedicated and focus on their targets. The more minds and disciplines in your team, the more success opportunity you might have. Through hard work, the right networking, the mentoring, you will eventually succeed. So get to know your market, learn how to make a business plan, and if you are a technical person by nature, look for that superstar that has the business in its blood. So you live, guys, in a region that has perhaps one of the greatest growth potential in the world. So take advantage of it. Thank you very much.